Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for ECD's Clergy Development webinar. We are here this month, as we are every month, talking about either your professional or your personal development, and sometimes really they go hand in hand. Today, we're going to be talking about pastoral masks, how we can live authentically in every role that we find ourselves in, serve in, and live in. And we're going to be talking today with Chris Cowling. Chris is a pastor for 27 years, pastoral ministry experience. He's been equipping leaders and building teams for effective ministry. He's been married for nearly 30 years to Debbie, who's a professor of nursing, and Chris is a devoted husband and father to two adult children, Eli and Leah. Beyond ministry, he has a passion for restoring things that might otherwise be discarded, bringing new life and purpose where it seemed lost. Chris also finds rest and renewal in nature. And when we have had conversations, Chris and I have talked about our love for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, being outdoors, and really just how we can support pastors and ministry leaders. So, Chris, I'm so thankful to welcome you to our webinar today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Carla, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and share, and hopefully it'll be something that really adds some value to the pastors' lives, which is near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. And as before you jump in, I just want to let everybody know
Mhm.
I love to interrupt Chris. We kind of joked that we're just going to have a conversation. And
Hmm.
although those of you listening can't verbally and we can't hear you, we would love to hear from you and be able to ask your questions. So as Chris is talking and sharing, if something sparks a question in your mind or a thought, please write that in the comments and I will
Hmm.
interrupt Chris wherever he is in his presentation. We'll talk about it and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So anytime throughout, pop your questions in the comments and we'll get to it. So Chris, without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carla.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really do like the interaction, want it to be mutual, and I'd love to hear your comments from all of you. And, when Carla and I talked about this title, we wanted to have something that would catch people a little bit. We talked about this mass idea. And it's a little bit true that we do need to wear these masks, but what we really want to do is show up authentically, and that's where this is going. And as a person who was 27 years as a pastor in ministry and then transitioning out, one of the reasons that this topic is near and dear to me is I learned some things after I transitioned out of pastoral ministry and into coaching and owning my own business that, man, I wish I would have learned earlier. There were some things that just, wow, I wish I would have gotten this figured out sooner. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is just this idea of how do you show up? How do you show up to the different spaces that you have to be in as a pastor? What does that look like for you? And I'll tell you, when I went through the process of being trained as a coach and getting certified, I learned that as a pastor, I would sit across from people, and I'm sure some of you have felt this. You feel this burden
Mhm.
to solve something, to fix something, to provide something. And whether it's self-imposed or expected from the other person, probably some combination of both, it sometimes was really difficult. And once I stepped into the coaching world, I didn't feel that anymore. I felt more there for the person, but I wasn't there for their problem. And I was able to separate. And I realized that it was because in my current role, my role is well defined.
Yeah.
Whereas as a pastor, it's just not. It's messy and it's fuzzy and it's gross and it's just challenging. So I'd love to show you. Here's where we live. These are the spaces we live right here. And probably a lot of you have seen this before. When we talk to people about how to live out their faith, we talk about living their faith out into these zones. You have your home life, your family, your that space with your spouse and your kids and your parents and aunts and uncles, all that home space. And then you have your community, and that's, baseball games, school, whatever it might be, maybe things you're involved with, the grocery store, all that space that's community. And then you have your work, that you have your workspace. And you see they interact, they overlap, and there's that space in the middle where they kind of engage. Well, this is where most people live, but you all that are pastors, this is where you live.
Yes.
This is what it looks like. It is really difficult to delineate those spaces. They're messed up. they're overlapping and people's it's just really challenging. I experienced this. We moved several times in ministry and made some significant moves. And I look back and there were a lot of friendships that I thought would carry on after that move, and they didn't.
Right.
They just didn't. And I think to myself often, I don't know, maybe somebody else has more experience in this, but if I was a banker or a teacher, I think more of those would have carried on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
hmm
I've experienced that. So we moved from East Coast back to the Midwest and thought, oh, well, these are people that go beyond the church role. And they
hmm
did, but yet they didn't
right.
because haven't visited them, really don't have
hmm
much of a friendship with them anymore. And it's you grieve that a little bit, but it's
hmm
how do you get away from
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge, and I'm not sure you can get away from it even fully. It's just a reality of how we operate as pastors. And that's where I want to talk about this because I think there's some principles. I think there's some concepts that can help us step into these
it?
spaces and really understand what's at the root. And I think many pastors, they just haven't really been taught how to show up in these unique spaces. And I think about Jesus just as he showed up at the tomb of his friend Lazarus and how he was fully present there to do a miracle, but he was also fully present to weep his
Yeah.
friends. And how do we do that? How do we be authentic but also protected and such? So I know for me, I first time I really experienced this was when oops sorry was when I was youth pastor for many years, and we had a student who we were really close to, and she's 19 years old, and she just passed away. She was
Oh,
gone, and it was heartbreaking. There was no why. She just literally dropped dead and was gone. She loved the Lord, and that was great. But I had to go to the morgue, the funeral home, with the young man who was kind of like a second kid to me, who was dating her, and I had to show up, and it was so challenging to be present because I just wanted to cry. I get emotional even thinking about it. I just wanted to weep, but he needed me to be this other person for him. And I had to step into that space. And that was the first time I ever really experienced it. And it took me about 6 months before I grieved
mm,
from that loss. It was about that long before I let myself figure out how to grieve. And I think if I had known how to show up and if I had had the right tools, it would have helped me kind of figure out how to compartmentalize in a very healthy way and
mm,
then deal with. So that's what my hope is, that you as pastors can this can just help encourage you that it's okay to have that separation to figure out how to show up.
mm.
So,
Yeah.
one of the tools that I think is really interesting is this concept that I've come across a while back called the Dunbar circles or numbers. And Dunbar was this guy that was an anthropologist, Robin Dunbar, and he studied many different cultures, contexts, villages, big cities, everything all over the world. And he came to this conclusion that we are biologically wired to have these certain zones of relationships. And it's really fascinating because we cap out at about 150. That's how many real relationships our brains can kind of manage. Now think about that for a second as
Yeah.
pastors. There's more usually. It's a
Yes.
lot more. And here's how these circles work right here is that you have this first ring of very close. I would use the word intimate. These are your intimate people, 3 to 5-ish people. And then you've got this other circle of close friends. These are people that you're gonna probably talk to once a week. You may have lunch regularly with and whatnot. They know stuff. You may go on vacations with them. They're pretty close, but they're different than that intimate first circle. There's this slight separation, and then we go to this 30 to 50 zone, and some people may even put that up to 70. And really, some of this depends on whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, how good your memory is
Yes.
and
Yes.
your context. I mean, that's why there's quite a range here. And then you've got that 120 to 150. Again, villages for many, many, many centuries capped out at about 150 people. We can look back and see that that was where we stayed for a long time until we really started building cities and going beyond that. Well, what did those cities do? They created neighborhoods.
Right.
Yeah, because we want to live in that space of 120 to 150. Then you've got this space of 400 to 500 that you kind of, they may be acquaintances or whatever. You may recognize them and know their name. And then you've got these other spaces that outside. And you might even go all the way up to 5,000 on that outer ring that you recognize 5,000 faces. But you may not be able to put a name, may have a relationship.
Okay. Okay. Chris, real quick.
Yeah.
So is this including like your spouse and your
hmm
kids? Okay.
hmm
So that 3 to 5, that could just be your immediate family.
Exactly. And that's where it should be. And that's really important to remember and hold on to. Now, here's what I think is interesting, Carla. Think about Jesus's relationships.
Yeah.
Do you see the pattern?
Yes.
It's like it's right there. It's like, and then we think we can do something different, but he did this too. He had this 3 to 5 and this 10 to 15, and then this other zones out there all the way to 120 and then 5,000 that he interacted with. Now, here's where it gets real applicable.
Okay.
This happens with organizations. And what happens is as we grow our spheres, our people, there's sacrifice that we have to make to have those relationships that move outside there. And there's tensions and there's communication issues and there's systems that need to be put in. And the more you grow an organization in particular, the more you have to really work on those lines of communication. So somebody that's in that outer circle, they may feel like they're in an inner circle,
That's good.
but
Okay.
you don't feel that they are. And that creates tension, that creates challenges. As a church grows, this is something that happens oftentimes. The other big problem here is that there's an amount of time we have to spend. So the less time plus the less number of engagements we have really has an impact on there, and it moves people outward. If we don't spend the time, we don't have the engagements. But our time plus move people the other way. Now, here's where it gets very, very important that we recognize that when we sacrifice our core relationships to grow our outer connections, the relationships are more transactional than mutual. And what happens is we suffer. This is where our pain starts to be felt. When we start as pastors, we start to grow our community. We start to lean into shepherding our flock and our people, growing our teams. We start to pour energy into those circles that are outside. We will sacrifice our intimate core relationships. And that is where we start to feel it. We start to feel empty. We start to feel frustrated. We start to deal with all sorts of issues when we sacrifice those core relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
how do you solve it? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
how do you
Yep.
avoid that? Because the
Exactly.
tell pastor, I will have some DS calling me and saying, "You're telling pastors to stop growing their circle of influence. We're
Nope.
in trouble."
And here's how. There's two ways that I think there's probably more, but two things. One, what we do in churches is we add more staff people.
Mm.
We add more people, we add more leaders, we add more lay leaders, we add these people so that our circles can grow because now we brought somebody else. Now, that's wonderful. We need to do that. That's one way to effectively start to reach and expand our spheres of relational influence. Uh, the problem is you do get a diminishing return on your investment at some point because you still have to keep people connected to, especially that close and friendship zone. So that's one thing that we need to do is to expand. But the other is that we have to identify how we show up to those situations. That's, I think, what the key is we have to really understand our role when we're in these spaces with people. So, for example, pastors, you might be going to a meeting at night and you're the CEO, you're the executive leader. But earlier that day, you were having coffee with somebody and you were their pastoral shepherd and you were stepping into that shepherd care situation. Then you've got to get ready to teach and you're going to be doing this teaching space and you're going to be the expert and the person that's really presenting this thing. And then we've got all this other space of, hey, I'm going to go to this township thing or this city meeting and I'm going to be representing the church as a whole. And what we usually do is we just kind of step into these spaces and hope for the best. And what I would challenge people to do is Identify what your role is in that space. Identify what your role is and what is your role not to be. What don't you have to bring to that space? You don't have to bring your full self all the time. You can know, okay, here's where I need to be. I need to stay in this space. I can't own this part of this conversation or this situation. I need to really be in this space of uh, being a community presence or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you said you don't have to bring your full self
Hmm.
time. What do you mean? Because I know that you're not
Yeah,
saying
and that's where it's going to
go
push.
bring
Yeah.
your true self because
Yep. Be
there's a
authentic.
difference.
But you don't have to bring everything you are to that moment. It's okay to be a little bit like, no, what they need right now. And this is where I think the servant leadership comes in. How are you serving that situation? Because that's our role is to be servants in those spaces. So, for example, if I show up and I'm bringing all of myself, including some of my baggage and some of my junk, I may not be able to serve. So, in that space, I need to step back and say, wait a minute, how can I step into here and be serving the people here? Because that will help you really stay healthy. That will help you be who you need. And here's what's very interesting. And I was able to go and share at a Bible college locally, and I'd sit down with some future youth pastors. And one of the things that I would tell them that would always really rattle their worlds is, you are paid to be people's friend. It's a
It's so
weird
true.
space.
Yeah.
It's so strange. If we're really honest, somebody is paid, and then there's this middleman called the church, the budget that's paying us to do this. There's this weird relationship. I actually think it's healthy to remember that and be cognitive of it, that sometimes that's the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that everybody leads a little bit differently.
Hmm.
Um, it's not an inauthentic friendship, but that's
Mm.
part of your responsibilities, your role,
Yeah.
the expectations. So that's really good. I have a question, but it may
Hmm.
be going in a direction. I don't want to get you off topic.
No, you're
Okay.
good.
What does it look like, or maybe how have you seen this play out when a pastor is in an unhealthy, like emotional, mental, spiritual
Yep.
state, and they feel like they have to bring their full self all the time?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
what does that look like? Just
Yep.
overextending,
Which
or
is right. You just went right where I'm going to go next. So
oh,
that's good.
perfect. We didn't rehearse
It's
this
good. Yes,
at
exactly.
all.
I love it. I figured that would happen. So this is where we get why we feel a tension. This is where it feels like this doesn't feel right sometimes. It's because when we do this in order to manipulate and in order to hide, in order to influence, in order to put ourselves first, that's when there's danger. That's when it's not a healthy thing, when you don't bring your full self, because you're not being authentic then. You're not showing up as a servant. You're showing up to say, well, I'm going to keep my junk back here, not going to tell anybody at all. And that's where keeping this circle, your intimate circle, and one of the key components in this is that when you enter into these spaces, you have to ask yourself, one of the questions we're going to ask in a bit here is, where do you debrief? Where do you bring back and reconnect your full self? How do you do that? And who do you invite into that space where you're 100% yourself fully and not having the pastor space? And that's really what this is about, is too many people don't recognize that a lot of the people we interact with, their relationship is with the pastor, not the person,
Mm.
the position, not the person. That's the reality of what we're doing. And honestly, it's probably okay, because I think people sometimes need the pastor. They don't need the person. They need the pastor, the position. And you step into that as a pastor that is fully aware of that, not trying to hide, not trying to be inauthentic, but knowing that, man, I get to step into this space and help this person in this time and be there for them as a pastor. What a joy that is. That's
That's,
fun.
I wouldn't say opposite, but I don't know if everybody would admit to that.
Hmm.
Like, because it feels like it's more of a job title than, well,
Hmm.
this is what I'm called to do. This is who I'm called to
I'd
be.
say the calling would be it.
Yeah. Okay. And so
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that maybe
Yeah.
it might be a little bit different for some to think of,
Yep.
no, I'm stepping into the role of pastor, and kind of putting on
Hmm.
a different hat
Hmm.
than just being your friend.
Yep. And what I've seen is that ours is the only space that's like that. If
Mhm.
I'm a realtor, if I'm a counselor, if I'm a teacher, there's separations that we have, and it's okay. But we hold pastors to this space where they can't do that. And I think there's something to letting us do that. And I think the reason is because it will help us protect our core relationships. It'll help us be able to function better as full people where we need to. I hope that makes sense. And again, it's a challenging topic. And again, I don't know. Maybe I'm off a little bit in this space. Maybe there's some tweaks to it. But this is what I've just been encountering when I deal with pastors. I've had pastors that have gone through some really terrible stuff, myself included. And boy, I wish I would have been able to understand that that was happening to my position, not my person, that it was not me, it was the position, it was the job, it was the calling, and there was things I needed to be able to separate a little bit in order to fully become me and become a child of God first, and to become a husband and a father first, and those things that
How
are
do you
really important.
How
Hmm.
did you recommend to pastors in your coaching?
Hmm.
Um, and by the way, we've had a few comments of just
Yeah.
people that have had coaching from you that they think you're great. So
Oh,
you can
thanks.
give them their $20 later for posting those really nice comments.
Awesome. Hello, everybody.
Um, but how do so okay, we get to this space as pastors where we know they're maybe coming against the role.
Hmm.
They have an issue with that.
Hmm.
But are the people we serve, do they also see that separation? Or is it,
And that's, yep, where the challenge. You're going to recognize it and they may not. So I think there's a couple things. One, you may just have to accept that. But there may be some things that's just like, yep, I got to roll with it. There may be other spaces, especially with like your board and those people that are closer to that inside circle that we have, that you may have to communicate. And one of those that's in the coaching space, and I think there's some really great resources out there, is to establish an agreement. What an agreement on our relationship. What is this? What are we right here? And it feels awkward at first, but the more you do it, the better it gets, the more it feels releasing for you to be fully present and fully there. But establish an agreement that we're going to be open, we're going to be honest, we're gonna respect each other in this space. That's important, I think. I had and I just had this happen recently. There's times that are messy. I have a friend that over the weekend his father passed away. Now, I said friend, but that's not really accurate. I was his pastor for many years. I'm still his pastor. He would call me friend, but I know that it's not a mutual friendship like that. I mean, I love the guy, I do, but I'm not going to call him if somebody close to me passes away to show up. It's just, he's not that close to me. But he called me right away, and I showed up because I'm still his pastor, even though it's been 5, 6 years since I was involved with him in ministry. I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. It was actually challenging. I had to pause and say, am I going to show up? Am I not going to show up? Is it appropriate? Is it not? And it was a real challenge for me to weigh it. And I don't know whether I made the right call. I showed up.
yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't know if you made the right call either, right?
Nope.
Not in it, but
And that's okay.
it's so true. I think in a healthy way, I don't
Hmm.
mean this in it, but people form an attachment to that role that they knew you in.
Hmm.
And even if formally it's changed, it doesn't automatically
Yeah,
change in their mind. Um,
exactly.
and I think you and I have talked about this, the more you can just be really clarifying, especially, maybe not just the person that's been at church for 6 months and
Hmm.
learning things, but your board and others where you can
Hmm.
really identify not just expectations, but just
Hmm.
who they're asking you to be and who you as the
Hmm.
person need to be in different
hmm
spaces.
And once again, because you're brilliant, that's a great segue to the next little
Thank
interactive
you.
piece. So
Uh,
if you're listening to this, what I want you to do is pull out something and just identify what are the most common top three, four, five roles that you step into on a regular basis. What would you call them? And how would you delineate them? What are they? And it might be that shepherd, it might be that friend space, the person space, all those spaces, or community leader, maybe that's one of them. And identify what those are, and then really think about what does authenticity for you look like to step into that space? What does it look like? And ask yourself, how do you create, number three, healthy boundaries for yourself and for others as you step into there. And that boundary, I want you to dig a little deeper than just, oh, I'm not going to let them text me after this time or that. No, mentally, emotionally, what are your boundaries? Where's the space where you're not going to let your emotions and your mind drift to that might take you places that are not places for you to own? And we as pastors, we all know it. We all struggle with a bit of a savior complex. It's just part of the I think it's part of the gig. We all do. So that would be one I'd ask, how do you not step in and take the role that Jesus needs to take in this relationship? How do you separate that? And that's a really important process to mentally take on.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would maybe ask the question of you, Chris. And I'll use my husband as an example. It kind of goes, it's like kids and pastors, right? I can use my
Hmm.
husband as an example. So sometimes he went to this men's group Bible study and somebody else was leading, but he's like, I'm gonna go and show support. But it didn't matter how often he said that, they always kind of turned to him as if he was
Hmm.
actually the real leader in the room and the expert.
Hmm.
And he was like, I don't know how to, I don't want to just not show up, but how do I help them see that in this space, I don't need to be the leader.
Hmm.
Somebody else
Hmm.
can. Do you have any wisdom to share?
I think saying that we have to be more open and honest about it. That we have to be more, hey, I'm not showing up here as pastor. I know that's challenging, and just really, really deferring that. I think that's important. And there's some spaces that just won't work. People just won't do it. You can't control that. That's okay. But what we often do is we want people to alter how they're perceiving us, but we haven't asked them.
That's good.
We just haven't said, could you please, do this for
Right.
me right now? And I've had that with some people. There are some people that I've said, hey, please, I'd rather not you call me Pastor Chris in this space because I'm just here hanging out. I'm just here being me, and I don't eat that. And there are some people that are like, oh yeah, of course. The other people, they just can't do it. They can't turn it off. And then eventually you have to just accept that. And maybe that's not a space that you can go and be yourself in, and that's okay. Um, and that's the part two of it is that I believe that when we go back to those spaces that we live in, where are you showing up where you don't have to be the position? Other than your intimate relationship, other than in your home, where's another space that you can just go be you? And it's probably not someplace in your community. It's probably not the gym or the grocery store or whatever, because you're still going to be carrying that position with you. So, and that's hard to find. That is really challenging.
Yeah, do you find that there's a theme among pastors that you've worked with where they find that space and kind of a recurring theme of where that is?
Hmm. I have talked to some people. Some people have this. I don't personally much, a little bit. Somebody that predates your pastorness. Like old college friends, old high school friends, people like that. That's a good space to go to. Another is just finding some group to be a part of that isn't church connected, and you can kind of go incognito and you don't have to show up trying to get people to show up to your church and such like that. And you got to shut that off then. You got to turn that side of you off
Yes.
and really
Yeah,
just
it's
be present.
like going when sometimes when I go on an airplane, and I know that's not
Hmm.
my space to get away, but I
Hmm.
like sit there and I'm reading my book and I think, oh, if I really love Jesus, I would ask the person next to me about, like, I would engage them in a conversation and try to
Hmm.
lead them to Jesus Christ. Not that that's wrong or bad,
Hmm.
but there's sometimes when I'm just like, I just need some silence and
Yeah.
solitude, even on a plane. And I think
Hmm.
as pastors, um, we love people and we love leading people to Christ so much that
Hmm.
we put this pressure that we always have to have that turned on in our
Hmm.
brain.
Hmm.
And I don't know. Help me out, Chris, to
I
relieve the
love
guilt from
so
people.
I literally love we're talking to you because guess what the next thing is some practical tools. So here's some
Okay, good.
concepts that would one, what you just talked about, slowing down. Just find where do you slow down and reflect. You know, we talked about before the thing that busyness is so prevalent and we want to just be busy, busy, but no, slow down. And it's I really wish we had somebody in the Bible that slowed down regularly and took breaks and naps and things. And I mean, it's crazy. We do.
That's
He
right.
was Jesus was lazy. He laid down, he was taking naps, he was off by himself. And I mean, we need to do that more. We need to step away. And honestly, it also reminds us that we're not needed. You know, when I realized in pastor world that I wasn't needed, and the moment I'm needed for God to really accomplish things, we're all in trouble. I want to be a part of what God's doing, but I don't want to be needed for it to happen. I want people to just need Him. So slow down and reflect, and that's that expectations. Manage your expectations clearly. And there's three things that I tell people to do with expectations. Make sure they're clear, and that means communicating them. That means understand them. Make sure they're clear to yourself. The next is, are they reasonable? Is it reasonable for you to have this expectation that's more internal? And then the third one is it realistic, which is external more? Is it realistic for the situation or the person to have this expectation? And we do have some people in our lives that their expectations of us as a pastor are just not reasonable or realistic.
No.
I had somebody not too long ago, about a year ago, reach out to me and she wanted to get together with me and talk to me about some things with her kids who came up through my ministry and stuff. And she was one of those extra grace required parents. And and I just simply said, hey, here's my calendar. Set up a time that works. And she messaged me back, well, there's no openings this weekend. I'm like, nope, there's
Mm,
not. I never heard from her again.
mm,
And I could be, I could beat myself up about not being available, but that's not appropriate. This wasn't as urgent as she needed it to be. It wasn't like somebody passed away. So having those have healthy boundaries is the next one. So reflect, expectations are clear, and having those boundaries is very, very important. And stick to them. Now, there's always times where your boundaries have to be breached.
mm. Yeah.
There is. To
Yeah.
expect you to never get a call at midnight or 1 in the morning, to not have to go to the showing up isn't realistic. That's not the job. That's not the calling. We have to. And I remember early on in my ministry space, my wife struggled with that. And then I don't know what happened. I really wish I understood, but she flipped a switch and she all of a sudden realized, oh, it's okay. He has to just be in this right now.
Yeah.
But this isn't all the time.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why, because I protected my boundaries when I needed to, so that when I couldn't, it was okay.
Yeah. And I
And
think
being
it
okay.
helps your congregation understand that too. Like, oh, okay, like if you are willing to take every phone call on
Hmm.
your Sabbath and you don't really have
Hmm.
a Sabbath and you've taught them that. But if you, you know what, if there is this emergency, like somebody passed away or accident,
Hmm. Yeah.
or I'm on vacation and a member of our board dies, please, yes, notify me. Um,
Hmm.
and I've been in other spaces and talked to some where they want to protect their Sabbath so much that they actually they're not realistic about that. Every
Hmm.
once in a while
Hmm.
people are messy and
Yep.
broken things happen and you have to deal with it.
Hmm.
Can I before you move forward though,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah. Good. I
a
love that
question
word
I had.
taught, though, that you said that you teach them how to respond.
Yes, and that doesn't
That's
happen
good.
overnight. So
Yeah.
if I could help pastors
Yeah.
see
Hmm.
and some of them are learned bad habits from
Hmm.
maybe previous pastor or previous pastors that
Yep.
did something a different way. Okay,
Yeah.
so we got this
What's some
quick
questions?
question. It's just a quick one. When you were talking about spaces, would you categorize space as a group or can it be a person or both?
I think it can be both. I think that you need to really figure out what that looks like for your context. For me, it's the roles that I step into. It's whether or not I'm putting on my executive hat or my, shepherd hat or my teaching hat. That was the first space that I went to as far as figuring these things out. And then you can also go to this. There might be people that you just need to handle differently because oh, this is a person I need to have keep them in this space. I need to stay in this role with this individual just for things to be healthy. Hmm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hmm.
There's seasons of life. There always
Hmm.
are. So seasons of maybe what your getaway group looks like.
Hmm.
But what about when you use your space or your group, however you want to categorize it, as an excuse for
Hmm.
not showing up, not
Hmm.
stepping into
Hmm.
your other role as needed? Um, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, how do you make sure that you have healthy interaction, but you're not using
Hmm.
it as an excuse?
Hmm. And this was a challenge because I can confess where mine is.
Yeah.
When I'd be sitting in the office sometimes and there's a certain personality type that would come in. They tended to be, and again, don't anybody take this personally, but they tended to be just they needed extra. They were looking, they tended to be people that um had a victim mentality and things like that. My coworkers would laugh because they say I became a jellyfish and I would ink and I would disappear. And honestly, I know why. It was a trigger for me. My mother was that way, and there's some challenging background there, and there's a certain personality type that I always had trouble with. And I had to really struggle with that and not use that as an excuse. I had to lean in sometimes and be present. And I think that's the key is, are you doing that? Are you stepping in to just simply put up a wall between you and people? Because that's not good.
Right.
When you're putting up the wall, that's not the same as a boundary. A wall is to separate you and say, I don't want to be a part of this. The whole point of what I'm talking about here is so that you can actually step into these spaces and be a part of it. It's about being fully present because I believe sometimes when we bring all of ourselves to a situation and we don't identify what we're showing up, we're not fully present.
Mm.
We're distracted by all the things in our mind and all the ways we feel a pressure on ourselves. So I think that's the delineation is you have to ask yourself, why are you setting this space up? Are you trying to do it in a way that you're just avoiding something and not handling something? I don't know if that answers your question, but I think
Yeah.
that's where you have to go to is, are you still being a servant leader? Are you stepping in to serve um,
Two
others?
questions.
Hmm.
One, just how do you, because we're not always really good at self-awareness. So
Hmm.
how do you evaluate? Am
Hmm.
I avoiding? Am I not
Yep.
putting up good boundaries? And then there's a
Yeah.
non-related question in the chat I'll get to
Yeah.
after you answer
That's
that one.
great. This is where the next there was those four that I was talking about of practical strategy that reflect the expectations, the boundaries, and the fourth one is debrief. Who and where are you going to debrief these situations with? And this is not a plug for me personally, but I do believe every pastor should have a coach. I don't care what it's me. Don't give me. Go find one. It's the only field that I believe that about. It's the only one that I think every one of us should, because here's why. We do not have truly safe spaces to process as pastors. And coaching creates that. And a good coach is not going to tell you how you should use things or what you should do. They're going to create space for you to gain awareness. And you need that. And a mentor would be great too. Sometimes having a good mentor, that's good. That's better than nothing or a cohort or a group. But I think you got to find those spaces. What I would be careful in is your spouse and those people in your inner circle. You need to have some of that. I mean, my without my wife's wisdom, I'd be lost. I mean, there's definitely I need her to help me understand some things. But I remember when I was going through coaching and seeing a coach, I would be I would be going up here in this room to get on a coaching call with my coach, and my wife would yell up, "Tell John I said thanks," because we need someplace safe to kind of process through and say, "All right, check me on this." But you have to give somebody permission to speak into you.
Mm, good.
If you don't have somebody that can call you out and say, "Yeah, you're being unreasonable here. You're being unrealistic," I think you're in trouble. I think that's a first sign of some real trouble.
It's good.
Hmm.
The unrelated question from our
Hmm.
listeners, how can you use physical locations to help determine the hats that people see you wearing? Maybe past or person.
Hmm. That's a great question. If I'm in my hammock, don't bother me. Um, and I think there is something to that getting away and having physical space. Again, if we go back to Jesus, he went away to a mountaintop. He distanced himself physically. Um, one thing I tell people too is proximity determines your relationships, and relationships determine who you are. So where you are matters a great deal. But who you're around become your friends. I've told students that for years, that where you work and where you go to school and all this stuff, that's going to drive the closest relationships. So that's brilliant. Whoever asked that, that's brilliant. That I think there's a truth there of space, and I hadn't even thought of that. That wasn't on my notes, but that's yes. Find a space, go somewhere, go for a drive. Those are very helpful ways for you to reconnect with who you are. And that's what this is about. One of the key components of this whole concept is, how do you step in the way you need to be and kind of separate yourself a little bit, compartmentalize, but then how do you reconnect yourself to your full self
Mm,
when you need to?
good.
It's that process that is so important, and we don't always do. And if you don't reconnect yourself for long enough, you start to have real fissures and breaks in just who you are, and you don't feel comfortable with your own skin.
I've known some people that their home is not really
Hmm.
open to other people. That's their sanctuary, that's their
Hmm.
place, their physical, like these are my handful of people and that's it. And then other people, their home is a safe space, but it's also an open space and at different
Hmm.
times.
Yeah,
So I would imagine it's really just whatever works best for your
it
personality, for
is.
your family, and what that looks like.
What you just said there, to that second part, don't skip over that
Mm.
for your family. Like, I would be fine having an open space like that. Come on over, it's fine. My wife would not be. I love it. She loves people, but she just gets, she needs her space. That's a protected space. And we've always had to find the tension in that. And I think that's another important word to remember, that all of this is found with intentions. If you're not feeling a tension as you do this, you're probably not doing it right. It should feel a tension and comfort, a bit of a, ooh, okay, I'm going to keep trying to figure out where this space is to fully show up, fully be present as this, but not bring this part of me. If that makes sense. Hmm.
I will
Yeah, that's
stop
really good.
asking you questions because I know you have a couple of
No, you're
points.
good.
So.
Yeah. I think that the last thing that I really want to just help is, I've got this list of questions for people to kind of take a screenshot, and just, I think this is a great list of just asking yourself these questions and getting it kind of hardwired into you. I just walk through them. And we've talked about some of these. What is my role in this situation, in this relationship? What is your role? And really identify it. Be as crystal clear as possible. What might they see my role? Now, I say might they see because you don't know. And I think there's a space where, especially a lot more than we think, we can ask them. It's okay to say, hey, how do you need me to show up for you right now? That's such an empowering question to say to somebody. How do you need me here right now?
Yeah. I
Um,
know that I'll just stop you.
mhm.
Sometimes
Yeah, please jump in.
my husband and I are both pastors. So
Hmm.
sometimes instead of asking the question, more as a statement, hey, in this conversation,
Hmm.
I need you to respond as my husband. Or other
Hmm.
times I'll say, hey, I'm talking to you as the pastor. And
Hmm.
we kind of laugh, but it really has helped
Hmm.
clarifying which hat
Hmm.
we're
Oh
wearing.
yeah,
And
yeah. My family will sometimes say, "Stop coaching me." Like, okay, I'm
yep.
just listening. Um, what how am I showing up for this moment? That's internal. So how are you? Are you tired? Are you frustrated? Is there anxiety? Is there stress? Is there a million other things you should be doing, want to be doing? How are you showing up? Being cognitive of that and really just processing. That's where that pause comes in, where then pause and deal with that reality. Don't just step into the situation. Uh, what are possible boundaries? And when I say boundaries, I mean what are boundaries you need to set? What are boundaries that exist? Just identifying what those are and kind of going, okay, I need to make sure that I don't commit to something. I had this happen recently. I was with somebody and they said, "Hey, are you going to be at XYZ?" I said, "No, I don't think I'm going to be there." I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say I have something else going on. I'm just going to draw the boundary. Say,
Right.
no, I'm not going to make it to that. What are distractions and tensions that you need to be aware of? So what's going on that's similar to that boundaries and showing up? How am I serving others in this situation? This is where that presence, this is why I believe this is so important because ultimately we want to show up and serve in whatever space we're in. That's what we want to do. And I believe that by doing this, we can actually show up and serve in the best way possible. And this, what am I not responsible for? What don't I have to own? What boundaries must I establish? Must be established. That's kind of mention that one. And how will I reconnect with my whole self afterwards?
Good.
Really important. Is it that space? Go for a drive. Go find that hammock spot for me. um, or is it a debriefing? If who do I need to process this with afterwards? Who are you going to talk to about it if you need to? And you may not need to. Some of these may be like, no, that doesn't really apply to this one. I'm good. And that's okay. You might not need to process it, but you may need to. Yeah. So I'm hoping those are helpful, uh,
Yeah.
just to help think through and process through. And Carly, here's my biggest hope is that I want pastors, I think I've told you this, I want pastors to live the calling that they have and never have the dramatic stories. I want to be a part of boring stories of pastors that have been around for 50 years in their positions and marriages and whatever, and they last. And I do believe that some of these things will help people with that longevity in ministry and calling. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I think we're coming right off of Easter. And,
Mhm.
it's a Super Bowl Sunday, really, if you will, for
Yeah.
church and pastors. And whenever I get a chance to just talk to pastors, I'm like, did you build space into that Monday to just, I
Hmm.
didn't use this language, but now I will reconnect with your whole self. Like, did you
Hmm.
use, like,
Hmm.
to have some uh solitude, some space, some
Hmm.
whatever, or I mean, maybe that's not how you rejuvenate, but
Hmm.
as pastors, again, it's we're so
Hmm.
passionate about what we do that
Hmm.
we fail to see how like asking these questions actually
Yeah.
make better
Hmm.
in the role and as people.
Yeah. That's good. Another thing that we that I just want to circle back to those circles.
Yeah.
Identify who's in your core.
Mm,
Protect those relationships. They will be the thing that sustain you. Don't sacrifice those for anything. And another key thing is quality time with those people doesn't count.
mm,
Quantity does. It's a misnomer. People have done all sorts of studies on this that quantity in relationships matters more than quality.
mm.
That we need to spend the time with those people, not just spend a really intense moment with them on vacation. That's great. No, spend the time.
That's good.
Mhm.
That's good. I got a couple of
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, sure.
Let's see. Okay. Can you talk a bit about how we show up to spaces not as pastor, but still as a Christian witness?
Hmm. And ultimately, that's what we want everybody in our congregation to do too. So, how would you tell them to do that? Would be my first question. uh, the challenge is that once you say I'm a pastor, the gig's up.
Mm,
It's really a challenge. So you got to be authentic. You can't not say you're a pastor. But the reality is, I'm not sure that you always can delineate. It's going to be hard because people are going to automatically see that as soon as that title is made aware. That you just have to. It's part of it. You can't get away from it always.
absolutely. Yeah, I don't like to hide it, but there are
Mm-mm.
spaces when it's like if it doesn't come up, we're just people.
Yep,
And
I think
it
that's great.
my when my husband bought his Harley, we were at the place and just talking, and there was some. It was maybe not Wesleyan
Mhm.
language being used, right? And but we were just normal, genuine people. And then when we were filling out everything, and they were like, "Oh, you're pastors," and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and like it was like it changed the dynamics, and we're like, "Nope, it's
Completely. Yeah.
fine. We're just people."
Mhm.
So it really does impact how people talk
Yeah.
to us. Okay, second question.
Mhm.
Um, how do you process through negative self-talk, guilt, shame, or regret that may show up after making a decision to show up in one way and afterwards feeling as if you should have shown
That's
up
good.
differently?
That's a really good question. Yeah. The first thing that came to mind is there a possibility of confessing that with that person? That I would really lean into that. Say, if you did show up and there was maybe something and they perceived it, it might be appropriate for you to say, hey, I didn't show up the way you needed me to, the way I needed to serve you. I'm sorry. There's just that first step can be really
It's good.
liberating for you. And I know that's hard, it's challenging sometimes, but when I've done that and realized it and actually followed through on it, man, it feels so much better afterwards. So if you can do that repentance piece, forgiving yourself, of course, is a key component. And then that part of that debrief is setting a plan for how am I going to do this next time? What does this look like the next time? Why did I have that problem? Identifying what threw me in that situation that I can be aware of now next time.
That's good. That's
Mhm.
good. Is there anything that you would say you see as a common thread? Is it age, experience, mental health, where people are more often showing up um, authentically in ways that they're supposed to or needed versus just getting it wrong over and over and
Mhm.
over? Do you see a theme?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I necessarily see a theme. I think there is something to that generational issue. I'm not 100%. A New Kind of Diversity by Tim Elmore is a really good book that talks about the different generational lenses. And there's definitely something for that older generation that does not feel like you should bring your whole self to work, for example. Like work is here and home's this, there's a separation. The younger generations seem to want to do that more, almost too much sometimes. So there's something there, I'm sure. But I also think it's very individualistic as how they approach it too. But that's a great question. I wish I knew for sure
Well,
answer. I
we'll just
don't.
bring you back. I'll ask you lots of
Yeah,
questions in between now and then when we'll bring you
it's
back.
fascinating. It's good.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to double check.
Yeah,
Um,
they're great
I just had
questions.
somebody just made a comment that um, silence and solitude and naps. They're super passionate about it with a
Yeah.
smiley. But
Yep.
sometimes that's unrealistic for the season we're in.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
um, I know, like right now, there's somebody listening on that's a mom of little
Yep.
people and also pastor. Can you speak for, I know we have just a moment,
Yeah. No, this is a great topic. I just talked to somebody about this the other day that
or like the
there are seasons.
bivocational
Yeah.
pastor that's like doing it all.
Yeah. One, I have lots of thoughts on the bivocational thing, but it's good. I love bivocational. It's a good thing. One, I think that you have to figure out, okay, what is going on. There's ways to work on just your energy mapping, your energy focus and such. But also remember, there are seasons that are challenging. So first, when is that season going to be done? What does it look like for that to be done? What you don't want to do is get in a rut and you get addicted to that season, because that's what we can do. We can get addicted to being always frazzled and say, no, figure out where's the end goal? When is that? What does it look like? I think of Jesus when he was with the woman at the well and the disciples come back. He's starving. They've traveled. He's hungry. It didn't matter. There was stuff to do. Like he didn't always go take a nap. He didn't do that then. He's like, no, look at we got work to do. And that's beautiful. We do have spaces like that where we just got to kind of go, this is the season. Let's get through it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. That's good. That's a good word. Um, as a mom of four, and my kids are still at
Mhm.
home, but I'm past some of that, and I can look
Mhm.
back and I'll be like, okay, it was a season when you're
Oh,
in
it
the
does
middle,
get great. Yeah.
when you're
Ours
in
are
the middle
growing,
of
man.
it.
It's awesome.
See you later. together. But when you're in the middle of it, it's a good word. Maybe if you are listening and you know somebody that's in a super busy season, maybe just an encouragement
Ooh,
to them would
yeah.
be a way you could
Or
minister.
a coupon for a night out.
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, Chris,
This
I'm
is
so
great.
thankful for
Thanks,
your
Carla.
wisdom. I do want to highlight, Chris never would want to, but I would. Chris is an amazing coach and helps pastors, ministry leaders, and people in the secular realm.
Hmm.
He's not
Hmm.
limited to just pastors, but I think you would be one of many options. But I would love to
Yeah.
recommend those of you listening, check out his website. You can reach out to Chris, see if it might be a good fit. But you're right. I think every ministry leader, pastor would benefit from having a coach,
Hmm.
that once a month connections, a safe
Hmm.
space. And I
Hmm.
think for those of you married, your spouse would thank you if you reach out to
Hmm.
a coach.
And one note on that, coaches, counselors, all those, they're like shoes. If they don't fit, try another one.
That's
Don't go
right.
barefoot.
That's right. Oh,
I
that's a
my
good
first coach was terrible.
That's a good word. Well, if you there's no pressure from me, but I think for some of you, if not many of you, would find Chris to be a great fit for you and your coaching needs. So thank you, Chris, and thank you for
Mhm.
joining us and giving us some wonderful
Yeah,
wisdom today.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You. I want to invite all of you listening to join us next month, May 22nd. It'll be the final webinar of our spring semester, and we're going to be joined with Dr. Rob Dixon, and he's going to talk about creating spaces where women can flourish. And I just want to put this out there. This is not a conversation just for ladies in the room. This is for men and women to tackle together because we have a work to do together as men and women, and we want to do that well and in a way that honors our Lord and Savior. So join us May 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.
In Acts 1, Jesus promises the coming gift of the Holy Spirit to his followers. But there was a gap between the promise and the presence. The author Luke tells us the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the hill called the Mount of Olives, a Sabbath day's walk from the city. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room. They all joined together constantly in prayer. The presence of Jesus broke in as they prayed. The Acts 1:8 promise welcomed in with prayer. Wesleyans believe in the empowering gift of the Holy Spirit lived out in us, making us a transforming presence in the spaces around us. Would you and your church join me and our Wesleyan church family online this Pentecost Sunday, June 8th, to pray in expectation, asking God to empower us with his presence to fulfill his purpose? I look forward to praying with you.